In 2006, one morning as usual, loud traffic horns woke up the sleeping city of Gangnam. The blaring sound of car horns creates a stuffy atmosphere. Looking down from above, cars seem to cover the entire street. At a certain office in the city center, employees panicked and reported, "Department head, comms funds had been withdrawn." The head of the department turned around, surprised. He asked, "How much?" The employee sweatily replied, "About 20,000 shares." The head of the department seemed to have predicted something. He raised his glasses calculatingly. Someone noticed and burned his upper hand. The employee still had a worried face and asked the manager, "What should I do?" "What else to do? There will be an announcement soon. It's best to split up now." The department head majestically pointed his finger and ordered. Looking away, he exclaimed, "I don't know who they are, but they are indeed lucky people." As soon as he returned, the department head immediately ordered all employees to be careful because we don't know when another lucky person like him will appear. If we fail now, we will be dead. On the outside, he appeared calm, but inside the department head was somewhat trembling. He was curious about who that guy was. It seemed like they knew everything we were planning, like a ghost. The scene changes to a certain apartment. The sound of typing on a keyboard comes from inside. The closer we got to the apartment, the more intense the sound of typing became. A teenage boy enthusiastically typing on a computer appeared in the scene. His face was full of excitement. The corners of his lips kept curling up, thinking for a moment. 46 million in 3 days is truly a number that few people can earn. Thinking about the amount of money, his excitement continued to increase. The screen shows a stock index that is constantly increasing. The teenager thought, "This is money that I have never had in my entire life." Even though he thought like that, greed took possession of him, but this was still not enough. I was still not satisfied. The corners of my lips gradually lowered, my face became serious. I haven't really started yet. Looking at the stock index up and down on the screen, he came up with a bold idea. Maybe I should play a little more. I'm still in need. In a small room in the countryside, where the summer heat has not yet cooled down, the 18-year-old young man, Jang Taizan, in the old, dilapidated room as it is now, was given a new life and looked forward to a new future. Someday, Taizan himself will write a legend that he will become a rich man, holding many properties in this prosperous city of Gangnam. In 2020, on the Han River, the image of a man pretending to approach the railing. That's Taizan from 14 years later feeling extremely depressed. I'm about to be hired as a full-time employee. The company Taizan was working for went bankrupt. Now he is not only unemployed but also has to endure prolonged poverty. Standing near the railing, suddenly Taizan's thought flashed, should I jump down? The water surface of the Han River at night is dark and deep, as if it wants to swallow people down there. Before he was about to commit suicide, a voice suddenly came from far away. Wait. Taizan was startled and turned his head to look. Calm down quickly, urgent voices from the security police rang out. It turned out that a teenager was standing on the edge of the bridge intending to do something foolish. He shouted, "Don't come here, I will jump." The security police shouted loudly, "I don't care, come down here quickly, the days ahead are still long, why are you thinking like that?" Responding to the police's questioning, the young man hesitated, his expression filled with confusion. He cried speechlessly, his hands clutching the bridge, "Me, really?" His life was over. The young man burst into tears. Clearly he still wanted to live. After being advised, he sobbed for help. The security police reassured him and he stood up first. Witnessing the scene before his eyes, Taizan's mood was complicated and he sighed in despair. Taizan's heart was troubled, thinking that every day someone threw themselves into the Han River. Taizan thought, even if he jumped down, this life would still be the same. He didn't want to commit suicide anymore. Taizan decided on a new plan, or should he go back to his hometown tomorrow? Taizan's footsteps walked along the bridge towards an unknown direction. Taizan stopped at the red light. Next to him was a boy in a yellow shirt engrossed in playing with his phone. The beeping sound coming from the yellow shirt boy's phone attracted Taizan's attention. Taizan became admiring the boy next to him, thinking to himself, he seems happy, so jealous of him. The red light gradually turns to green, colors pop up in the dark night. The boy in the yellow shirt walked across the street with his eyes still focused on his phone. Taizan whispered, not even paying attention to the signal. Taizan's thoughts were on the boy in yellow shirt. Kids today are so interesting. Suddenly, the sound of a car horn came from afar, startling Taizan. A car suddenly came. The yellow shirt boy was in danger. Taizan shouted loudly, "Hey!" Taizan stared wide-eyed at the car approaching the yellow shirt boy. That car was going so fast. Like the speed of light, the car rushed forward. Taizan's sweaty forehead glanced at the yellow shirt boy. The boy still calmly dialed his phone and walked on the street without knowing he was in danger. The ear-piercing sound of car horns gradually came closer, signaling the sound of death. The yellow shirt boy wearing headphones is still immersed in his world. Seeing that, Taizan couldn't bear it anymore. He couldn't let the boy die. Tyson opened his eyes wide and looked at the scene before him, internally screaming, "Dangerous!" Finally, Tyson shouted with all his might, "It's dangerous, kid!" Combined with his legs, Tyson rushed straight towards the boy urgently. At the same time, the car was still approaching at the speed of light. The yellow-shirted boy only then realized the situation, his face stunned, not knowing what to do. Tyson used all his strength to rush forward, reaching out to push the boy away, putting himself within the car's range. The feeling of death covers all senses. Tyson seems to freeze. The car crashed into Tyson, throwing him away. The feeling of pain rushed in, but Tyson's consciousness was still active. He cursed in pain, "Fuck. So, do I have to die like this? I've never lived a single day of kindness?" In that moment, Tyson could still think about the fact that if after he died from a sexual accident, his parents would receive the insurance money, right? Tyson's consciousness completely disappeared. A voice rang out, "You idiot," completely awakened Tyson. Tyson woke up, surprised by the current situation. "What's going on? Why am I so absent-minded?" Suddenly, an old man with gray hair appeared before his eyes, making Tyson wonder, "Who are you? Why am I floating like this?" Tyson thought he was dead, so it was possible that the old man in front of him was his own dead body. Could it be? "Are you the god of death?" Tyson's words made the old man fall silent. The old man calmly tapped his wooden staff once and said, "I am your ancestor." Tyson was stunned. Ancestors? What? He couldn't believe what the old man just said. The old man shouted angrily, "I made you a descendant of the sky, so I let you wag your tail with the neighbor's dogs like that. They are even bastards who look down on us." Tyson suddenly being scolded hurts my ears. "What are you saying?" The old man raised his hand, his beard and hair blowing in the wind. "Listen carefully. I will grant you a favor." The old man frowned and said, "If you can be revived, don't try to act like a gentleman. Never forgive your enemies, or smash them to pieces so they can't raise their heads again." Tyson still didn't understand. He asked again, "What are you talking about?" The old man's eyes twitched as if sparks were emitted. "If you can't do it, I will kill you again, making you die over and over again for 5,000 years. Feeling like falling down, Tyson was scared. "Wait, what are you doing suddenly?" Tyson followed gravity and his scream filled the air. The louder he shouted, the faster he fell, and Tyson's mind seemed to be turned upside down. The scene of Tyson Road just hit by a car appeared before my eyes. About to fall into it again, Tyson screamed in panic, "Didn't you say save me?" Tyson's head hit hard on the stone road, pieces of stone broke like Tyson's nerves. The alarm clock rang, a loud sound signaling the morning had come. A hand rushed forward, blocking the sound of the clock, pressing the button to turn off the sound. The feeling of having just died made Tyson unable to adapt immediately. He had difficulty opening his eyes. Tyson lay on the bed, eyes wide open in surprise, looking at what was before him. Feeling surprised beyond words, Tyson widened his eyes. "Where is this?" Tyson stood up and looked at the small, old room in front of him. A familiar feeling came over him. Tyson recalls, "One day in August 2020 my head was broken. I was 32 years old at that time. But strangely enough, I am now. Looking in the mirror, I see that I am young again." He looked at the bookshelves. That was the boring life of a man. The mess around the room, the misery of loneliness in adolescence. I looked back in surprise. Oh my God, what was going on? I pinched my face because I couldn't believe it was true that I had just fallen asleep in bed. Spreading his arms in front of his eyes, he saw that he looked toned. It was a photo commemorating the Mid-Autumn Festival in 2006. "It's unbelievable but so cool." Tyson started calculating how old he was. "I really couldn't believe that I was 18 years old," he wondered. "There's nothing scary about the age of 18 in a person's life." He started to remember the old man from yesterday and thought, so he wasn't lying. He began to remember the memories of 32 years of his life, mixed with joy and sadness, resurfacing in his head. Memories are despised by people. The memories of his lover and his colleagues were so vivid that he couldn't even think of them as dreams. Tyson turned quickly to look at the object next to him. That was my high school uniform shirt. He wondered, "Do I have to go to school?" Remembering the scene in the classroom made me sweat. The high school years that linger in his memory are all about playing games with his friends. I feel ashamed of myself when I only sleep in class. He was stunned when he remembered his own academic achievements. His face darkened and he suddenly remembered something. He found that he remembered all the self-exclaiming tests. Damn, this wasn't a dream, right? He still remembers the law exam. An image of the exam appeared in his mind and he wanted to take it again. Suddenly dumbfounded, he gasped when he remembered that he used to work in the stock market. With the goal of getting a job at a securities company, he studied for a consulting certificate in 3 types of finance, bonds, treasury, and even derivatives. Not only did he not learn about the Korean stock market index, the Korean electronic stock market, foreign stocks and stock indexes, he also learned about stocks and financial leverage derivatives. Thinking back, life is not a dream, that alone is not enough. In Taizen's mind, he remembered that old man. Why, he once said, "I will give you a gift." Taizen wondered what gift it was. Something made him come back. Suddenly a blinding light appeared, making him unable to open his eyes. From that end comes the sound, "Sit down, cross your legs," made him curious as to where it came from. That bright light disappeared and suddenly a black crow appeared. The old man he met appeared before his eyes again. The scene began to change and he turned around and asked, "Who are you and where is this?" He answered and identified himself as the head of Shinsun Hospital, Chunryung Shin. Taizen shouted back and asked, "What, the head of Shinsun Hospital?" Seeing that he was still far away, he began to angrily shout, "Hurry up and move, this is a practice-breaking curfew, if we are exposed you will be in trouble." He didn't think much about Shinsun Hospital, practicing against the precepts, or the divine dragon, they were all strange things to him. That old man complimented Taizen on his muscles are good, how can they be like that? He was surprised to be complimented like that and replied to his master, "My muscles are good." Suddenly the old man with a sinister face spoke straight to his heart, "Don't watch porn anymore, it'll break your bones." He continued, "Don't keep eating noodles like that, it's very bad for your blood." He started to seriously call you, "Close your eyes, let's begin." Taizen was a bit apprehensive, he looked down at the cliff below and felt more afraid to speak to the teacher in front of him. He didn't say what was wrong, but this place looked too dangerous. The old man sitting far away shouted loudly, "You know what the 3 core elements are? Speed, patience, ki." He finally agreed to sit down and practice because it sounded convincing. He said it looked like martial arts movies and novels. Hearing that, the old man threatened him, saying that practicing nonsense would hurt his bones, but he thought his master was like a charlatan. It was already late afternoon when it started. The teacher is behind you. Taizen suddenly started to feel like the powerful heavenly dragon was really behind him. He put his hand on his back and began to teach him. He said, after comprehending the small heavenly cycle and finding that truth himself. Hearing that, he turned around curiously and asked, "How?" "I answered your question, that's all I can say, now let's begin." He began to teach internal techniques to Taizen. He began to feel his inner strength. Power was transmitted to him. At the same time Taizen thought, "What is that? Why do I hear the sound of waves behind me?" He was gradually feeling the power more clearly. He advised, "Hold back, the more pain you have, the stronger you will be." Taizen could only think in his head with the uncontrollable pain from too much strength in him, "This old man, how can I hold back, I'm about to die." His endurance had reached its peak. He just kept giving him all his energy. Taizen's limit has been reached. So strong that all the animals were scared and shocked the whole area. Taizen seemed to gradually lose consciousness. After being taught internal techniques, Taizen felt the miserable feeling that everyone always talked about. His sweat flowed non-stop. The harmful fluids had been expelled from his body, and he was sweating profusely. He writhed in pain, feeling that this old man's Buddhist teachings were burning his nerves. "The power that was injected suddenly made me think I was dead." His blood vessels swelled as if they wanted to burn his body, but this old man still did not stop, until his body reached its limit, as the old man said, when tears and snot flowed out of his eyes due to pain. The limit of strength will also multiply with that pain. But that old man still decided to teach me the 5 pearls Tai Chi. 5 pearls Tai Chi are martial arts that only a few people can perform. Returning to reality, Taizen did not expect the power that was given to him. He realized that old man, he was not lying, he had understood the 5 pearls of Tai Chi. He remembered the old man's advice, "It just looks evil," but in fact, he is an outstanding disciple of the martial arts school. He is also a martial arts expert who fought for 4 days and 3 nights with the leader of the Fat Hoasun clan, took his life and received an award in the 3233rd contest of the Jade Emperor. You think it sounds cool, but who can verify it? Taizen looked back at his clothes, he was really sweaty. He thought, the effect of Buddhist teachings is really great, I have this much sweat in my body. Looking at the calendar hanging on the wall next to the clock, I clearly saw the sunrise and set many times, but the time here still hasn't changed. Standing on the bed drenched in sweat, he wondered if that was okay. Because of the mold on the wall in the distance. Taizen exclaimed, "Oh my god, look at that wall, it smells of poverty. Look at the network on the table. Next to it is a Celeron 500 system, 6 GB RAM, 4 MB graphics, 10 GB hard drive. There is also pirated software on the computer." Taizen was quite surprised, it looked like something from a museum. He felt and smelled the nauseating scent coming from the room. The room was extremely messy and there was a smell of sweat on the bed when he was infused with internal energy, so he decided to clean it out first. Suddenly there was a call. Tyson came down to eat breakfast. The familiar calls in his subconscious he remembered from his mother every time she called him. Tyson, come down for breakfast, you have to eat breakfast. He thought, even though I had heard these words my whole life, I still felt warm now. My mother was the only person who was by my side even if I failed or lost my job. He began to remember his mother. Perhaps his emotions were indescribable. In his mind, he recalled the days with his mother, the memories of the days when she texted him to tell him to eat enough meals. In his memories, his mother often said, "Don't eat noodles and fast food all the time, you have to eat well, son." Returning to reality, she was urging him, "Hurry up, the soup is about to get cold." Tyson quickly said, "Yes, Mom, let me take a shower first." He quickly walked into the bathroom and took off his clothes. Looking at his strong and toned body in the mirror, he was surprised and asked himself, "Am I already this tall?" Laughing reluctantly, he was extremely surprised as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Rinsing the cool water from the faucet made Tyson feel more refreshed. He wondered if his body had been purified. Immersing in the cool water slowly feels so relaxing. Looking in the mirror, he was quite surprised and happy because his skin was also smoother. Peaceful scenery, clear blue sky. Tyson walked downstairs. He had just finished bathing so he could feel the comfort and coolness. Tyson, wrapped in a towel and drying his hair, suddenly stared into the distance. Before his eyes appeared gardening tools, and this was the garden where his mother always worked hard. There's also his father's old tractor. This is a house that has been passed down from ancestors for 10 generations, so it is quite old. For those reasons, he lives in the countryside. It felt like he hadn't come in to eat for a long time and was standing still like a man, so his mother asked, "What's wrong?" Tyson turned back to answer, "Yes," hesitantly continued, "I just thought the weather was so beautiful today." At the same time she brought out a fully and thoughtfully set dining table. She kindly smiled at him and told him to eat quickly, it's about to get cold. Thinking back to my mother who had to work every morning in the orchard, she looked so haggard. However, she was always the most beautiful mother in my middle school parents association. Thinking of my mother, Tyson couldn't hold back his emotional tears. His eyes began to well up, yes, to his mother. Unable to contain his emotions, he immediately rushed to hug her. Seeing her son suddenly act like that was so different from usual, she also suddenly said, "What's wrong with this guy? He's already so big and still alive." Tyson called out with tears in his eyes, "Mom, you are the most beautiful in the world. You are as beautiful as a fairy." She was also very panicked and asked, "Why is it suddenly like that? Why am I crying?" That kind and gentle woman, she graduated from Hanjin University of Fine Arts, where only excellent artists in Korea can study. Her mother once said that before she got married, she had never touched a piece of grass, yet my mother is a farmer. She heard her son's words and smiled happily and said, "Oh my God, it seems that in this world, we are not the only ones who are blind." Tyson continued to sob and said, "Although Mom is still healthy, don't try too hard. The more you see that Mom doesn't look like a rural woman at all." She patted her son a little shyly and said, "Stop it, there must be farmers so everyone can have food to eat." Tyson exclaimed to his mother, "Why are you so lucky? Did you sell your country in your previous life?" She smiled happily and said, "This guy." She became happy, her kind face smiled brightly in response to her son's words. Surely, her mother was a princess who betrayed her country. Tyson thought to himself that it's been a long time since he's seen his mother smile. Hugging his mother, feeling the warmth from her, Tyson thought to himself, "Mom, from now on, I will let you walk on a path full of flowers." After a while, seeing him hugging so tightly, his mother said, "Son, if you love me so much, why don't you eat more?" Hearing that, he quickly let go and apologized, hugging his mother without asking his father's permission. Hearing that sentence, she laughed loudly and said, "You're right, your father's jealousy is not the normal type." Then, he and his mother sat down to eat at a daesan booth. Along with the cool breezes, the scent of hot food rises. Tyson began to invite his mother to eat. It had been a long time since he had felt like that. Compared to what he had experienced, this was truly a precious meal. He ate deliciously and thought to himself, if I don't reincarnate, I won't be able to feel this again. I just brought in a spoonful of food, but he was so quick to praise me, my armpits hurt. "Mom, it's spicy and fresh, it's okay for drunk people to eat it. Why don't you open a restaurant instead of working as a farmer?" If my mother opened a bean soup restaurant, it would be as expensive as hot cakes. She asked him again, "Today you still know how to get drunk. Did you secretly drink alcohol from Mom?" "Mom, I'm an adult, why didn't I know?" She knocked his head and smiled, saying, "You joke a lot like your father." Tyson recalls that when he was in college, he was a notorious drunkard. But when he's young again, "I'm just a young man who doesn't know the smell of alcohol in his head." He can only think to himself, and in front of his eyes, his mother is angrily warning him not to touch alcohol. Looking far away, he suddenly saw a mouse running past. Also remember the oldness of the objects in the kitchen and the house. To the living room and the old TV, wondering why our family is so poor. Look at that little mouse. Staring at it, he realized. We must get out of this situation, we cannot continue like this forever. Tyson thought, I have to make money. Jang Tyson's mother suddenly approached and asked him, son, what's wrong with you today? I heard that if a person suddenly changes their personality, that person is about to die. Jang Tyson is currently diligently washing dishes after finishing the meal. His mother cares but can't bear to let him do it, so let her do it. Normally you don't get involved in these things. Jang Tyson turned around and happily replied, okay mom, when I was in the army I also washed dishes. His mother tilted her head in confusion and asked again, joining the army. He smiled awkwardly and replied, I'm just kidding. Jang Tyson's mother was still skeptical and continued asking, are you and your father trying to tease me? He tried to deny it, but it wasn't true. He realized that he was not good and thought, I used to be a bad child, and I never did it. He just continued to wash the dishes and turned back to talk to his mother. Mom, his mother asked, what else? His face was full of happiness and he said, I will make mom happy. His mother immediately replied in a louder voice. His father and son said that every day. A while later, it was noon, the space was quiet and peaceful. Because mother was not very healthy, she did not work at noon. Jang Tyson diligently took a towel and cleaned the floor. Diligently wiped from this corner to other places. Then he went to the window curtain, opened the curtain and shouted, let's clean up these bad smells. The old washing machine in the corner has finished washing the clothes. He took the clothes out of the washing machine and started hanging them outside to dry. His eyes darkened with sadness, thinking that my father had gone to the bank to borrow money. But then Jang Tyson continued to clean the house. He sat on the window to look outside to wipe the outside door. Then Jang Tyson brought the trash bag to throw it in the right area for others to collect the trash, took the trash bag there. He saw the cat sitting on the trash pile and angrily chased it away. Hey, go away. After finishing cleaning the house, Jang Tyson sat down to rest and breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, it's done. My father specializes in growing organic apples, without using fertilizers and pesticides. He glanced over and saw a chopstick of apples next to him. Organic food is not very popular in Korea, because very few people are willing to spend money to buy expensive organic fruits. Furthermore, they taste like nuts. He reached for an apple and tried it. Then he continued to think about his current family situation, but his father's debt was very high. Then he grimaced and spit it out and said, what is this? There is nothing good about this pile of apples. Father has an orchard in 2 rice fields that his grandmother left behind 3 years ago. And in just a few months, it will all be gone and left with debt. Thinking of this, Jang Tyson's eyes darkened with sadness and helplessness. He continued to think about the important current issue at this time. At that time my family started to decline. And my father's brothers never came back again. My poor father. Jang Tyson stared at the apple basket and thought of a solution. First of all, I have to find a way to keep the fruit garden and rice fields. The problem is money. At this moment, a glimmer of hope appeared in his head, numbers appeared in his mind. He exclaimed, yes, I still remember the stock chart from the past. Even though I've only seen it 1 or 2 times, I remember it very clearly. Why is that happening? Have I become a genius? Then Jang Tyson immediately objected to what I had just thought. It's impossible, moreover. Does it make any sense for me to return to the past like this? The male lead raised his head and looked up at the peaceful blue sky and thought, going back in time to 2006, that sounds crazy. But then a huge problem appeared that made Jang Tyson feel difficult in this country. What does it mean to own government stocks? The male lead stood up and slowly walked inside the house, but his mind was currently busy thinking about ways to make money. No one would lend money to high school students. Even if he had a part-time job now, it wouldn't be a good idea, don't have much money. With this situation, I cannot earn capital for my parents. Jang Tyson went into his bedroom, sat down on the chair, said uncomfortably, hey, what a genius, what could be better? Then he glanced at the computer on the table, and an idea immediately appeared in his mind, stock. Looking at the computer, he said, that's what I can do now. But then reality immediately disappointed him, but this computer is too weak, this scrap can only be used for typing documents. Jang Tyson suddenly saw something that made him think, wait. The MANHUA application appeared on his computer, making him excitedly exclaim, this is it. The male lead's eyes widened as he looked at the app he recognized in his head, web novel, MANHUA. Jang Tyson's laugh gradually became full of cunning and mystery, he. His eyes looked at the bright computer screen, he smiled and said, I'm sorry, writer Jang Hee-jae. Jang Tyson immediately remembered that magic warriors, along with lightning swords, were the 2 masterpieces of Korea at that time. The male protagonist's fingers nimbly used the mouse pointer to click on the software to type text. His mind still keeps thinking about those two novels, the first published in 2007, authored by Jang Heejae. Until 2020, the series has released 59 publications, and the number has not stopped. Jang Taizan smiled and exclaimed, "Oh my god, I remember every detail clearly." The male lead's fingers continuously typed. The screen also displayed the first lines of the novel he wanted to write. Jang Taizan said, "Same title, Magical Warrior, who belongs first to you, there." Jang Taizan's mind kept thinking about the novel, while his hand was constantly typing documents. The male lead's name was Red and the female lead's name was Jurin. After her father passed away, her family collapsed. To help her twin sister continue going to school, Red, the main character, is accidentally connected to an artificial game. While writing the male lead, he exclaimed in admiration, "The story is great." Jang Taizan's fingers skillfully glided over the keyboard keys. Suddenly, all the content of the novel lit up in my head, clear to every word. The male lead smiled and said, "I take back what I just said, I am truly a genius." He was still diligently typing the text. While typing, he not only said things like, "It's so interesting," he rewrote his previous work almost exactly, but felt that the masterpiece would be recreated under my hands. It was already a masterpiece, I didn't need to edit anything. Nimble fingers clicked documents. After just a while, Jang Taizan was able to write a lot of content in the novel. His mouth laughed loudly, his cheeks were red, his face showed excitement and said, "Wow, this smooth composition, yes, I already have literary blood in my body." The male lead smiled sinisterly. Implicitly said, "Let's just post it to the free directory first, right?" His eyes looked at the keyboard full of confidence, smiled and affirmed that the series would explode. Jang Taizan clicked to post his post. He stared at the screen with great anticipation and said, "This is a masterpiece." He started giving himself a nickname on Panmungo, it would be Gold River. The male lead looked at the computer screen showing his name and the article he had just written. His eyes were full of sparkles, his mouth was smiling brightly and he confidently said, "I am so proud of myself, my writing is also normal." Then he justified to himself that he had taken someone else's work. It was true that he had stolen the novel from the future. Suddenly, I remembered a famous quote from the main character in the novel, "Money has no eyes, whoever comes first is his." Jang Taizan shouted loudly, "Money has no eyes, whoever comes first is his," making the surrounding houses and the quiet countryside atmosphere suddenly noisy. His mother also woke up because of that. She covered her ears and wondered, what did that boy eat wrong? In an apartment building in a bustling city, a man was blowing on a chopstick of noodles and asked, "What novel is this?" Next to his computer there was quite a lot of fast food. He ate a cup of instant noodles while staring intently at the computer screen and exclaimed, "Wow, this male lead. I thought he was just a failure, but turns out he has some talent. This man's appearance is quite sloppy." He slurps his noodles while complimenting him. "This novel is great, it's the best book I've ever read." He read the novel and burst out laughing, this red name. Are those three useless items more important than women? As soon as he ate the noodles, he laughed so loudly that the food in his mouth, before he could swallow it, flew out. The man raised his hand and clicked on the mouse pointer and said, "I read all 10 chapters at once." He picked up the rice ball he bought at the supermarket and brought it to his mouth to eat, but his eyes were still focused on the computer screen, smiling and saying, "It is Gold River, if you release a book, I will buy it immediately." Then he fixed the rice ball in his mouth, typed on the keyboard with both hands, "Now make a reservation and recommend it to everyone." The man clicked on the keyboard again, then left a comment. From outside the window, you can hear him typing on the keyboard very clearly. Even though it was a free series, it topped the charts with only 10 chapters. Jang Taizan looked confidently ahead. The next day, in the hustle and bustle of the city, at a newspaper office, a voice asked, "Assistant Lee, have you seen this series?" Assistant Lee looked at his computer screen and replied, "Yes, even though it hasn't been released yet, they will still print 5,000 copies." On his computer screen right now are the comments from the audience when reading the novel. The chief editor asked, "There are only 10 chapters now, right? Is it too early to print it?" Another employee looked up at him and replied, "You see, this novel is very funny and the storyline is progressing very well." Another employee continued, "It's a very popular novel." An employee wearing a black vest sitting at the right corner of the table spoke up. The author was probably a famous author but had changed his pen name to publish the novel. The chief editor was still skeptical about the other staff's opinions and asked, knowing it was funny, "But don't you think fantasy novels would be more attractive than game novels?" His employees compete with each other to answer, and readers' tastes have changed. Recently, this game genre is very popular. The staff kept praising the novel, Magical Warrior. The title was very attractive. "This novel has great potential." The chief editor still hesitated and observed his staff. A girl with shoulder-length blonde hair wearing square-rimmed glasses suggested, "I will recommend this novel. I read it yesterday. The main character is really attractive. Our chief editor must contact the author." The chief editor asked, "What are the conditions?" She replied, "If the author is not a novice, we can divide 8% of the profits of 4,000 copies to that person." The chief editor was surprised and asked again, "What, so much?" She replied, "Actually, I was planning to propose 5% of the 5,000 copies." He thought for a while, then agreed and said, "The original proposal was better, contact the author." The subordinate replied, "Yes, I will do it now." At another newspaper office, a man with jet black hair asked his colleague, the chief editor, if he had read it. At this moment, the chief editor is making himself a cup of tea. "This novel is very good, what do you think?" The chief editor, still holding a cup of tea and stirring it, replied, "I read it yesterday. The review was very good, I'm sure it has a lot of potential." The black-haired man continued, "I also think it's very promising, please publish it." The chief editor was surprised and asked again, "Why?" The man pointed his index finger and said, "Offering 10% of the 6,000 copies." The chief editor sipped tea and smiled and replied, "Is it too much? I'm afraid the publisher won't do it. If the person who signed the contract with us knew, he might get angry." The black-haired guy then smiled happily and said, "I had a dream yesterday, there will definitely be at least 10,000 copies released." The chief editor looked at the CEO and smiled, implying something. The chief editor also quite agreed with the dark-haired guy's opinion and said, "I don't know if things will go smoothly, but this novel will definitely be a phenomenon." Then the chief editor gave instructions, "Contact the author, if that person calls, I will personally go see him." The man replied, "Okay." 3 a.m. on the mountain behind the orchard. Jang Tizan was sitting and doing internal exercises, very focused. His whole body was now showing many tendons surrounding his body. "I still faint like before, but my body can last longer." He took a breath and then realized, his breathing became lighter. The male lead concentrates everything on cultivating internal energy. The sky gradually brightened, a source of light also appeared around him. After a while of hard work, when he opened his eyes, the male lead's face was filled with excitement and joy, it was great. Then his whole body seemed to emit a halo, countless martial arts moves constantly appeared in his mind. Jang Tizan took a deep breath. Immediately, Jang Tizan stood up and performed those moves in an extremely smooth and powerful way. Eyes are highly focused and move quickly. Jump up and kick your legs up high. The surrounding leaves were torn one by one, and smoke and dust began to appear because of his moves. When he finished performing the exercises, he choked up and pressed his lips together, his cheeks turning slightly red. Standing in front of the tall rock, I happily and excitedly raised my arms and shouted, "This is the top of the peak, I will no longer be a failure." I can't practice Tai Chi at home, so I built a temporary tent on this mountain 500 meters above sea level. Returning home, Jang Tizan took a shower and sat at the table, turned on the computer to review the status of his novel. He was happy with what he saw and thought to himself, as expected, there were 5 publishing companies, contact me, go to step 1. His face showed calmness as if he knew everything would happen like that. He smiled smugly and thought about it, just ignore them for now. The only reason this novel series is so popular in 2021 is because it is so funny that people cannot resist reading it from beginning to end. Then the male lead continued to click to see more information. He excitedly said, "The best benefits are for experienced authors, do they want to meet me?" Jang Tizan continued to consider the situation. Many authors have fallen into bankruptcy. So I'm not in a hurry, just let them know me first. The male lead leisurely propped his feet up on the chair and clicked on the computer. Who would believe it? The male protagonist reminded himself that on the internet there were many articles about authors who signed contracts with publishing staff and received bitter endings. I have to be very careful. Moreover, Nice Media publisher, the Magic Warrior novel was originally published by Nice Media. When the sky was completely bright, it started to rain again. Jang Tizan's mother wondered and asked, "Oh, where are we going? Why is it so sudden?" The male lead smiled brightly and said, "I will treat my mother to a grand meal." The mother was surprised by her child's words and replied, "Huh, you don't have any money." But then she still smiled gently and said, "Okay, I haven't dated my son in a long time." Jang Tizan and his mother were walking on the street, but the male lead's intention was, "We were on our way to meet the owner of producer Nice Media, to discuss the contract. But what I'm worried about right now is, but damn, I'm still a teenager now, so I'm a bit worried." Jang Tizan already had his plans. He smiled at his mother and thought in his heart, because minors are not allowed to be involved in agreements related to the law, so parents are required, stand as a guarantor. The law involves both wages and fines, so I need my mother to come along as my representative. The bus stopped, the two of them slowly got off the bus. Jang Tizan helped his mother down and gently reminded her, "Here she is, Mom, be careful," the mother said, "You've been so funny lately." Then the male lead and his mother walked together under an umbrella on the street. He pointed to the left and asked his mother, "Let's go get some coffee." The mother replied in surprise, "Coffee? Have you already drunk coffee?" He smiled slightly, looked at his mother affectionately and replied, "Of course, with the weather like this, let's have a glass of iced Americano, shall we?" The two continued to happily walk together on the street in the rain. The two walked to a coffee shop. He turned around and smiled and asked his mother, "You believe me, right?" The mother immediately replied, "Of course, my son." Then they walked into the shop together. Two people from the editorial office looked back and recognized them. The black-haired guy said, "There it is." The black-haired man suddenly whispered to his colleague, "I'm just a student," and the other person said, "They're late." Zhang Tizhen looked at the two people from the editorial office and smiled with satisfaction and silently praised, "They were punctual, a plus point." The male lead approached the two men's table and asked, "Are you from Nice Media?" Both of them opened their eyes wide in shock and stammered, "Author of Gold River." The male lead smiled softly and replied, "Yes, it was me." His mother, standing behind, looked at her son in panic and wondered, "What, the author?" Zhang Tizhen walked over and said, "Hello, hello." He smiled confidently and introduced, "I'm Gold River." Choi Wong-chun and Huang Song-woo widened their eyes in surprise as they looked at the male lead. They were skeptical in their hearts. They didn't look like professional writers at all, just like students. The chief editor faltered and replied, "Hello." Zhang Tizhen still maintained a small, confident smile as he looked at the two people in the editorial office. Choi Wong-chun widened his eyes and looked shocked, thinking, "But, what is this aura? His tone is so arrogant, and as soon as he entered, he recognized me. He is really sharp. He is not the average person." The male lead saw that they were silent and looked at him for a while, then he retracted his smile and asked, "What's wrong?" The two people from the editorial office immediately realized they were showing off too much and awkwardly smiled industrially and extended their hands to invite him. "Nothing, please sit down." Choi Wong-chun happily said, "You're younger than I thought." Huang Song-woo continued the question right after, asking how old he was. Zhang Tizhen answered quickly, "A second-year high school student," making the two people in the editorial office sweat. Their smiles also disappeared, replaced by a very unbelievable expression that made them think to themselves, and spoke condescendingly, "Again." Choi Wong-chun seriously looked at the male lead and felt worried. Sure enough, he wasn't simple. It didn't seem like it would be easy to sign a contract. Zhang Tizhen and his mother sat down on the chair. His mother turned to him and asked, "Son, who are they? Also, what is Gold River?" Huang Song-woo looked at Choi Wong-chun and smiled, thinking, CEO Choi was confused. The male lead's eyes were full of cunning, glancing at the two people in the editorial office, smiling slightly and thinking, they couldn't control their faces, so they hit him again. He then crossed his arms and asked with a serious look, "You guys don't want to sign a contract with a high school student, right?" His mother quickly stopped him. "Child, what are you talking about?" Huang Song-woo quickly raised his hand to deny and said, "No, let us introduce ourselves first." The two people from the editorial office introduced themselves with confused and worried looks. "I am Choi Wong-chun, CEO of Nice Media, and I'm chief editor Huang Song-woo." The male lead looked at them with satisfied eyes and smiled softly. Then he seriously replied, "Nice to meet you, I'm Zhang Tae-san." The male lead turned to tell his mother, "Please introduce yourself too. These two guys are the CEO and chief editor of Nice Media Publishing Company." His mother was stunned and asked again, "What, a publishing company?" Zhang Tae-san calmly replied, "Yes mom, today your son will sign a contract with the publisher." Choi Wong-chun immediately held out his card. He held the key in front of Zhang Tae-san's mother and said politely, "It's a pleasure to meet writer Zhang's mother. I'm Choi Wong-chun, CEO of Nice Media." The mother looked confused and replied, "Yes." The male lead looked at the CEO and smiled with satisfaction, thinking, "He called me writer Zhang, how cute." The male lead's mother raised her hands to receive the card. The CEO gave it with both hands and said, "Her son is great." Then the male lead's mother suddenly remembered and asked in confusion, "Wait, what's going on? Why is my son a writer?" Zhang Tae-san turned to his mother helplessly and asked, "Why can't your son be a writer?" His mother replied as if it were natural, "She knew well how you write, why would you be a writer? Moreover, students have to worry about studying. What is the point of being a writer?" Two people from the editorial office were sweating and nervous and responded in unison. "Yes, you're right, ha ha ha." He calmly explained that during the vacation, I posted a novel online, and if mom allowed it, I would sign a contract. His mother was surprised and asked again, "Contract? You signed it, really?" Zhang Tae-san looked at his mother meaningfully and said, "Seriously, mother, you just said you would trust me to the death." His mother panicked and replied, "Then surely, her fate is about to come." Choi Wong-chun immediately continued to praise, "Sorry, ma'am, Gold River's magical warrior novel. No, writer Zhang Tae-san here is really charming." He confidently said, he published a novel not long ago, but it was admired by many readers. You can trust him. The two editors brought water to drink happily. The chief editor continued, "As an editor, I can say it is the best work I have ever read." The male lead looked at the two of them and frowned in confusion. The male lead's mother put her hand on her chin thoughtfully and said, "Magic Warrior. The title sounds good, right?" He smiled confidently and said to his mother, "Mom, your child is very talented." Then his mother looked at him without saying anything, but her eyes were filled with concern and worry. Jang Tae-san suddenly remembered and asked, "You too, can I order coffee?" His mother quickly reminded him, "What kind of thing are you talking to adults like?" The two people from the editorial office were suddenly startled in realization and exclaimed, "Ah." Then the two guys shyly asked, "Oh my gosh, I'm so serious, I'll go order right away. What do you guys want to drink?" The male lead smiled brightly and replied, "One iced coffee and one bingsu." The head trainer immediately left his chair to go to the counter to order drinks. Jang Tae-san started to get serious and asked Choi Wong-chun, "Did you bring the contract?" Choi Wong-chun happily replied, "Yes, this writer seems impatient." The male lead calmly said, "I'm not impatient, I'm just curious." Then he took out the contract from his briefcase and showed it in front of him. "Here is the contract." He read it carefully. The male lead received the contract and turned the pages to read it attentively. Reading the paragraph, he frowned. The publisher will keep the second copyright for 5 years, and automatically renew. In the contract, it is stated that, Clause 16, second copyright and license during the contract term, Nice Media has full rights to use the author's novel, if related to the issue of collecting usage fees. He smirked and said, "Are you kidding?" Jang Tae-san whispered in his heart, "Just look at this, I'm preparing to take the judicial exam." At the same time, the chief editor also brought drinks to the table for the mother and son. The male lead calmly said, "The second copyright must belong to the author, please rewrite it and send it to us." Hearing that, the CEO was sweating and worried. He immediately flustered and explained, "Writer Jang probably didn't know, the second copyright is not a big deal, other writers all sign contracts like this." The male lead frowned and said, "I don't like this clause, the publisher only has the right to print my work." He continued, "Moreover, if you want to export abroad, you must also discuss with me." CEO looked worried and confused and said, "But," his mother also looked at him and was sweating. Jang Tae-san offered more. "Moreover, for the down payment, I want 20 million won." When two people from the editorial office heard that number, they both opened their mouths in shock as if they couldn't believe their ears. 20 million won. His mother also widened her eyes and looked at him in surprise and called, "Tae-san." The male lead crossed his arms confidently and said solemnly, "The guarantee fee and commission for 6,000 copies is 10%, if you want to resell. As soon as the announcement is complete you must deposit the monthly commission into my account." Choi Wong-chun was worried and replied, "Haha, it's writer Jang, he seems so impatient." Chief editor Hwang Song-woo replied back, "Sorry, no publisher would advance that much money to an emerging writer, although the current views are a bit of a breakthrough. But there is no guarantee in the long run it will be the same." The male lead noticed and saw that behind the editor-in-chief's briefcase was a notebook. He smiled and said, "Oh, I brought it with me, a notepad." Choi Wong-chun said in surprise, "Why?" The chief editor asked in confusion, "Why do you ask this?" He looked at the two of them with a serious expression and said, "I will give you a chance. If you don't like it, you can refuse." He took it out and placed it on the table. CEO Choi suddenly said, "USB," Hwang Song-woo asked in shock, "What is this?" The male lead pushed the USB in front of him and replied, "It was a manuscript." The two of them were surprised and confused. The manuscript. Jang Tae-san's eyes were full of confidence and he spoke sharply, "There were 5 manuscripts of magical war bottles in here." At this time, looking out from the window, the sky was still cloudy. The male lead's mother was stunned by what her son had just said and confusedly asked, "Tae-san, am I not dreaming?" He looked at his mother and smiled slightly, thinking, "Hey, dreaming, Mom, you will be even more surprised, everything has just begun." Two editors plugged the USB into the computer and started looking through it. Jang Tae-san thought to himself, "Now, just wait for their reaction." The CEO and chief editor stared at the computer screen with their mouths open in surprise. All they could say was, "Oh my god, ah." He smiled with satisfaction and thought, "Why are you opening your mouth like that? If it's good, just say it." Choi Wong-chun looked at the male lead with determined eyes and said, "Writer Jang, please sign a contract with us." CEO agrees to the male lead's condition, "I will pay you 20 million won immediately." He replied satisfied, "Wise decision, boss." He reached out and took back the contract. Then he seriously said, "We will redraft the contract according to my request, please sign here." Jang Tae-san's mother looked at him worriedly and called Tae-san. It was still pouring rain outside, people were walking around briskly. Inside the shop, the two sides were still discussing the contract. Jang Tae-san said, "Please submit the income tax declaration properly. When reselling, you must pay me according to the content of this contract." The editor replied, "Of course, I will do it according to professional ethics." He raised his hand to sign the contract, thinking in his heart, not knowing if he should trust them or not. Never mind, just trust the money in his account. Then, this is what it feels like to be a writer without waste of brainpower. Ho ho. The chief editor passed the contract to the male lead's mother and said, "I will act as the legal representative, so please sign it." His mother replied, "Yes." Hwang Song-woo continued, "I have already paid you 20 million in advance." His mother exclaimed in surprise, "Huh?" The male protagonist looked down at his phone with satisfaction and smiled, thinking, back then, until my death, my tattered bank account had never had 2 million, I would slowly fatten you up. CEO shook hands with Jang Tae and politely said, thank you for signing the contract with us, writer Jang. He happily replied, thank you, both sides will benefit. Then he turned and said to his mother, we can go now, mother. His mother was startled and replied, okay. Two people from the editorial office immediately said, wait, please stay and eat with us first. Jang Tae politely refused, maybe next time, we have to go now, but in his heart he secretly said, his mother is not used to eating with strangers, and now money is like a mosquito to him. Outside the door, the rain still continued. Standing outside the door, the male lead's mother bowed her head and said, I don't really understand what's going on, but I'm sorry for being rude. CEO shyly replied, no ma'am, collaborating with writer Jang is our publisher's luck. The chief editor turned to look at Jang Tae and asked, oh right, writer Jang, there's one more thing I forgot to ask. He smiled and asked, how many episodes do you plan to compose? Judging by the current content, it's probably around 10 episodes, right? The male lead calmly replied, 60 episodes. The two people from the publisher once again gasped in surprise, so shocked that they were sweating profusely. 60. Jang Tae smiled and thought, what to do now? I remember up to 59 episodes, a masterpiece like this only has 20 episodes, it's very cruel to readers. The producer stammered and asked, is 60 episodes too long? He happily replied, don't worry about the manuscript, there will be 60 volumes. The producer continued to say, we will consider the situation and continue to talk about it next time. In Jang Tae's heart, it's certain, I'm sure in a few days, even if there are 100 volumes, you guys will happily publish it. Leaving the cafe, walking on the street, I have a lot to do today. The two continued walking in the rain and the umbrella was covering the top of their heads. His mother turned to ask, where are we going now? He smiled brightly in reply to his mother, let's stop by the bank for a bit. His mother slightly lowered her eyebrows and asked, what business do you have there? Jang Tae calmly smiled and replied, yes mom, it's very important. His mother was worried and asked, what's going on? Can you tell me, why are you suddenly a writer and earning 20 million? He looked at his mother thoughtfully, I will start work tomorrow afternoon, so I have to open a stock account that day. The mother continued to ask with a very concerned tone, should we discuss it with your father? As for the male lead, he is still concentrating on thinking, right now I am still a kid who depends on my parents, with this 20 million, I can completely pay off my father's debt and interest, but I haven't touched it yet, this money is urgent. The male lead looked at his mother and said, Mom, you still believe in me, right? His mother quickly replied, Mom, I believe you, but... He smiled gently and persuaded his mother, give me a month and I will talk to my father myself. Mom looked at Jang Tae with hopeful eyes, he was still calculating what to do in his head, this money was just the beginning, it was the goose that laid golden eggs for his family. Then she smiled kindly and lovingly and said, okay, I believe my son. The rain stopped, the male lead raised his head to the sky, put his hand out to check and happily said, the rain has stopped. Then he happily told his mother, let me invite you to eat jajang noodles. She hugged her son's arm and happily said, more sweet and sour fried meat, my son has so much money. He replied cheerfully, okay mom. The next day, when the sun was still peeking behind the distant mountain. Until the sun appeared clearly. Jang Tae sat on the rock concentrating with all his might. Then he suddenly opened his eyes wide, I saw it, saw the details. Appearing in front of the male protagonist at this moment was a giant transparent stockboard held in the air and said, I'm ready, let's go to the battlefield, now the game is in my hands, it's my turn to suck your blood, thumb. Returning home, Jang Tae opened his computer and saw a stock chart and said, it's been a long time. He stared intently at the screen and smiled softly and said, you really are buying and selling in droves, so cute, this game is similar to a card game. The male lead raised his hand and clicked the mouse cursor happily and proudly said, you guys are definitely dead, ho ho. Jang Tae smiled and said, let's start, then he started calculating in his head, the starting unit price in the bear market was 2,251, the price of small stocks in the market was 50 billion won. He opened his eyes wide and thought, this situation will happen a few times, now it's time to do it. His hands are constantly clicking on the keyboard, as a former stockbroker, it's okay to talk about being quick. Then he smiled and thought, when 20,000 shares were bought, the average unit price was 2,501. Jang Tae said, they are panicking, now let's take care of each other, ha ha ha. At a company where the male lead had bought shares, there was a loud shout, the manager Kayam had his capital withdrawn, the response to that loud shout was, what, how much? He replied, 20,000 shares. A thin, middle-aged man wearing a business suit asked uncomfortably, did someone notice it before? The employee turned around and asked worriedly, what should I do now? The man gritted his teeth and thought, then said, what else to do, there will be an announcement soon, let's divide it up first. Then he shouted to all the other employees in the room, I don't know when there will be another lucky guy like that, now we fail, we're all screwed. The man's face was now full of worry and fear, thinking, he was like a soul, holding all the secrets in his hands. Who exactly was he? Then he turned his head and looked out the window at the city and said, what a lucky guy. The estimated income of this campaign is up to 10 million won. If things go badly, at least 19 people will shed their blood. At Jiang Tizhen's house, when he bought the stock and saw the profit, he excitedly thought, oh my god, this is a lot of money, it's too much Pepsi. Looking at the stock table, I exclaimed in my heart, in 3 days I had 46 million, that's terrible. After cleaning up the uncollectible amounts, I still have 26 million left. Then he continued to click on the keyboard wondering if he should continue playing or not. I still haven't figured it out. Jiang Tizhen's smile gradually lost its humanity. He smiled cunningly and said, Moha. I haven't started yet, who cares about money? In his heart, he thought, this still doesn't mean anything to me. In the past, even though I used to be a broker, I never used to cheat this much. This week there will be news announcing the development of a drug. The male lead smiles with satisfaction, and the stock chart will develop steadily. He stared intently at the stock board in front of the screen. On the computer appeared the words, Sky New Reform. Jiang Tizhen was excited. You guys won today, just let the money run with it, haha. Sitting in front of the computer desk, he couldn't stop exclaiming. He didn't expect that the knowledge he learned about skyrocketing stock values that he learned as a broker would be so useful now. The stock market is very exciting now. He quickly pressed the keyboard with satisfaction. The trick was already in his hands. Looking at the screen with confidence, you'd be crazy not to take it. At a bookstore in the city, a customer asked if there were any new novels. Boss, the bookstore owner replied, there is a new book, but the title is a bit strange, Magical Warrior. The customer came to the book counter and took out the book Magic Warrior. The customer said, the cover of the book was fine. A boy wearing round glasses flipped through it and complimented, oh, that's fun. Then he decided to take this book. When the boy next to him saw that, he immediately felt curious. The boy next to me asked, really, I thought the main character was a bit boring, but the boy wearing glasses replied, it's a funny read, the storyline progresses quickly, it's interesting to read it first. The people nearby also glanced curiously and thought of the novel, The Magical Warrior. The owner turned to the boy wearing glasses and said, hey kid, do you like that book? Pay here. The boy opened the door and smiled and replied, yes, I bought it. Then the boy who bought the novel told his friend, let me read it, and I'll tell you about it. That night, at the bookstore that was buzzing about the novel, one person said loudly, boss. That novel is so great. The other person replied, why do you reply so quickly, isn't it fun to read? That person continued, it's exactly my style, the next episode is already booked. Jiang Tizhen is currently at home excitedly typing on the keyboard to write a novel. The next day, when it was dawn. At Jiang Tizhen's family dinner. Parents and their 3 children, as usual, were sitting and eating together very warmly. The mother was surprised and looked at her husband with wide eyes. Then she worriedly asked, what's wrong? Jiang Tizhen used his chopsticks to pick up some white rice from his bowl. He slowly put it in his mouth and chewed it. The male lead looked at his father without saying anything. The father then smiled kindly and said, it's okay, don't worry, let's eat. When his other 2 children saw this, their faces were also full of worry and panic, asking, what's wrong, Dad? You look very pale, please go to the hospital, father. Jiang Tizhen looked down and thought, I guess it's time to say it now, to put an end to my poor fate. Then he slammed his chopsticks on the table and said loudly, the rice is so delicious it hurts my armpits. He smiled brightly, raised his 2 thumbs to the like button and said to his mother, her pea soup is the top of the top. His younger brothers thought helplessly, please be a bit more subtle. Jiang Tizhen turned around and winked at his mother, silently saying, don't worry. The mother looked at her son with eyes full of hope. His eyes were full of seriousness, thinking, I will make my father more excited. Then he asked everyone, do you all have time today? One of his younger brothers asked again, what's wrong? The other brother continued, he was eating rice, brother. The mother smiled industrially and asked, is there anything, son? He thought helplessly, it's so fake, Mom. Jiang Tizhen replied, today I will treat my family to a drink, and play until the end. The 2 younger brothers looked disbelieving and said dejectedly, you. The father looked tired, the little pancreas said with difficulty. Decent, Dad is a bit out of breath today. He looked at his father with pity. Then he turned around and smiled and said to his mother, today I'm taking my father with me. His mother happily replied, but what else? The male lead advised, Dad, please bring your proof, and the 2 of us should bring our student cards. His mother asked curiously, what was the use of bringing proof? He happily replied mysteriously, there was something he needed to use his mind for. Jiang Tizhen's 2 younger brothers were surprised. One asked, what happened to you today? The other asked, are you forcing the whole family to work part-time? He immediately interrupted, Children, don't ask too many questions. The boy was not convinced and argued. You are only 2 years older than me, Jang Tizan thought excitedly, my time has come. The thought of being able to spend money like water makes me excited. The next day, when the whole family got in the car and went on the road. In the car the male lead told the story to the whole family. His younger brother was surprised and said, "Huh, the second brother is a writer. What is a rose, dude, is it money?" The male lead replied, "Well, not much." Arriving in the city, the whole family walked the streets together. One of Jang Tizan's younger brothers excitedly said, "Wow, I haven't been to the city for a long time with that family." The other brother immediately replied, "It hasn't been a long time. It's my first time going." The two children stopped and marveled in surprise. "Ah, look at that," they said in unison. Any call, in front of the two children are two small phones. They excitedly stood at the phone counter praising them endlessly. "It's so beautiful. There's a 1.3 megapixel camera too, isn't this so pretty?" The male lead looked and smiled slightly. 1.3 megapixel. The father standing behind smiled softly and said, "I can't buy it anywhere, kids, let's go." Jang Tizan calmly said, "Just take whatever you like." The two of us asked in surprise, "Huh, really?" The two children happily kept asking, "Did you buy it for me?" "Anything is fine." The father panicked and worriedly waved his hand and said, "T-san, you guys are still young, these things are very expensive, even if you have a commission." The male lead happily turned to talk to his parents. The parents also chose a pair of phones. "The design is so cute." The mother happily replied, "Thank you son, I'll go choose too." The father turned helplessly to his wife, "Me." Then the whole family happily and excitedly chose the phone they liked. Jang Tizan's mother told him, "I like this one, honey. Let's get one too for a pair," and the male lead pointed to another one and said to the salesperson, "I'll take this black one." My two younger siblings happily complimented me. "My brother was the best, did he really buy it?" After making all the choices, the male lead told the staff, "I'll make a lump sum payment, just count it all for me. My two younger siblings are still underage, so let my parents name it." At this moment, the father's face was pale and full of worry. The clerk gave him the receipt and said, the total was 2,170,001. The whole family gasped at Jang Tizan in surprise when they heard the amount to pay. "What, 2,170,001? He happily gave his card to the staff and said thank you. The staff said, "We will not charge a booking fee." After paying, they continued walking. One of his younger brothers said, "My sister is the best, will you treat me to lunch?" He happily answered, "Of course." At the building of a securities company, a loud voice shouted, "What?" The company's department head pounded the table angrily. "What the hell happened this morning?" His employee replied, "I don't know boss." "It's from Count, Yond and Gubwa," he angrily asked. "That much, how much is the total?" The employee worriedly answered, 1 billion. The department head shouted loudly, "Who is this guy again? Is it the same guy from last time?" The staff said, "This time the amount is different." The employee worriedly said, "Maybe he's a billionaire." He angrily cursed in his heart. "A guy who knows nothing about the morality of this world, bastard." The employee asked, "What should I do, boss?" The manager angrily shouted, "No matter what, just follow the plan." He threw it out and grabbed it right away. The whole family was walking when suddenly Jang Tizan stopped. The two younger brothers asked him, "What's wrong?" His mother was also concerned and asked, "Why are you so tall?" The male lead said, "Let's go in." Then he turned around and opened the door and said, "Here." Jang Tizan pointed inside and smiled and said, "Let's go into this store." The whole family started sweating when they saw that. The mother asked, "My child, where is this place?" "Step inside to see the auto shop." When the manager sees the guests arriving, he warmly welcomes them to our safe and sustainable Samyang Bus Company. The whole family gasped in surprise as they looked at the male lead, and he thought, nothing is more important than the safety of his family. He slowly walked forward. The highlight of today. Coming next to a white car. Jang Tizan smiled and asked his mother, "How do you feel about this car?" The store manager quickly introduced, "This is a Rockstone SUV, a representative product of the Samsung brand." His mother smiled awkwardly and replied, "Well, that's beautiful." Then the male lead turned to look at the car and said, "It's suitable for taking two children to school, right?" His father frowned and asked worriedly, "Tizan, what's wrong with you today?" The two younger siblings asked with bright eyes, "Will you take us to school by car, Dad?" He looked tired and said, "Do you think our family will need this car, given our current situation?" He turned back to look at his father to reassure him, "Don't worry, from today it will be different, don't worry." The mother turned to tell her husband, "Honey, Tizan secretly bought this just now." Then she gave him a blue notebook. Receiving the notebook, the father wondered, "Is it a bank book?" The mother replied, "The novel my son wrote is really doing very well." He looked at the numbers in the notebook and sweated in surprise. It's hard to believe that looking at the notebook is a big number and wondering. 50 million won. Jang Tae's and his father's face immediately softened and was skeptical. Our Dzan has that much money. The mother smiled and said, my child has grown up. His father. He looked at his son in amazement, emotion, this kid. At this moment, the male lead was smiling gently at the two of them and said, Dad, just believe in me. He recognized his son. Already grown up. His father smiled happily and replied, yes, of course I believe you. He smiled and thought, I understand your father's feelings. The money to buy that phone is enough to pay this month's interest. Don't worry, from today, I will write another page of history for the Jang family. Jang Tae happily got into the car and asked the store manager if this car was in stock. The staff wondered. Why, he continued, if you don't have one, you can take this display case. Then he reached out and patted his younger siblings' heads and told them to come sit and try it. Then he took them shopping. He secretly said in his heart, from now on, the breadwinner of this family is him. When his parents saw that, they smiled with satisfaction and happiness. The two brothers smiled brightly in joy. The two children shouted in unison, I love you the most, so the trip ended. Tomorrow morning, Jang Tae was wearing his school uniform, but in his heart he felt strange. How long has it been since he went back to school? At the bus stop so he can go to school. The male lead smiled and realized that he was now a high school student again. Everyone took turns getting on the bus. Jang Tae also got in the car to count the school. Standing in a bus full of people. He felt that everything was still the same as before. From rows of seats for customers to sit on to those who still ride every day. He smiled happily and said to himself, long time no see. Inside the bus Jang Tae saw an empty seat. He thought to himself, his familiar seat has been gone for too long. He put on his headphones and looked around, everything was still the same. The headset is plugged into the ear. On the bus, there was laughter and joy from everyone around him, but he was still immersed in his own world, getting on the bus every day, listening to a Moonsae's music on the way to school. Image of a female student turning to the table below to talk. He watched the scene outside through the window. Seodong will go public today. Even though I'm in school, my investment will automatically be added. Now my net account is over 1 billion. He happily chuckled in his heart. I was already on automatic mode ha. On a beautiful morning, an ant was crawling on the ground. Normally ants do not invest in stock values that do not fluctuate. They bet their lives on skyrocketing stocks and enjoy the ups and downs in value. They rush headlong into red and black, causing that obsession to be fully exploited by powerful forces. I am also one of those ants. To the powers that be, the chart means nothing. In the end, the ants cannot do anything to them. And the end result is that they suck all the blood. However, Jang Tae looked outside. There are flocks of birds flying in the sky. And I have knowledge and information from the future in the palm of my hand. Even being a stock expert can't stop me from missing opportunities. While immersed in his own thoughts, he was startled when he heard a familiar voice. Two female students were talking to each other. He was so sad that the vacation had ended. The two of them continued to chat. Why did you have such dark skin, like going to a chili farm? Now he discovered an acquaintance. Oh, there it is. Mi Jin explained to her friend, otherwise she would have gone to the beach with that family. Na Young walking next to her said, really so jealous. This is Mi Jin, who always brags about her travels. And next to her is Na Young, her friend, who was always jealous of her. The two girls were silent for a moment and didn't say anything. Both girls opened their eyes wide as if they saw something. Jang Tae also suddenly looked. The two girls saw that he was very handsome. So handsome that I wanted to ovulate. He was the one who spoke first to break up this awkward atmosphere. If the bag is too heavy, I can hold it for you, made the two girls startled. Ha. Then Min Ji quickly gave him her bag. Mine was very heavy. He didn't hesitate and said, okay, just give it to me. The two female students looked at him in surprise. Who is he? He looks familiar. I thought so too. I feel like I've seen him before. The two men on the other side looked at such a scene and scoffed. There was a crazy girl here, but his face looked familiar. The other people on the bus exchanged words. Myung Chul's bag, I can't see clearly anymore. Should I come and ask, are you crazy? Jang Tae sat to the side, looking at them with a smirk. He thought to himself, oh yes, there are all the upperclassmen in this car. The three girls next to me said admiringly, I don't know who it is. But it's very attractive, my type. Jang Tae smiled and thought. Female students this age are still a bit naive, but in just a few years they will become bold girls who actively ask for men's numbers. Seeing Jang Tae smiling, the girls laughed and talked to each other. Mom, he's smiling, I'm in love, guys, I'll come talk to him. On the bus the song resounds, in the neighborhood you are very good. No one saw me drunk, my mother told me everything, but forgot to tell me not to get drunk. Jang Taejin suddenly saw someone, suddenly opened his eyes and felt happy. Ah, the person I wanted to see again. The person I always look at from afar. My first love, the person I secretly love. Lee Yaren. When he got to school, Jang Taejin's friends all gathered around and asked, "How many vegetables have you eaten in your life? I can't even see you, you're so handsome now." Dae-sun pointed at Jang Taejin and said, "The new uniform looks so good on you. Like it was tailor-made for you, ha." Jang Taejin was moved and shed tears. Thinking, when he went to school, all the love affairs he encountered when he encountered his old love suddenly fell apart. "I miss you guys so much." Dae-sun is sobbing every night because he has rhinitis. Jang Suk, with his shaved head, is determined to study, but his grades are still mediocre. Haeun Choi was bald before he was even old. And as long as Do Jung has food. He doesn't have any brothers anymore. Bong Suk always calls himself a poet and acts like he's rich. Dae-sun asked Jang Taejin, "Did you secretly take your old man's growth medicine? Why are you so tall?" Jang Taejin replied, "If you stop watching porn, you'll be like me." Dae-sun scolded him harshly, "Living without porn, I would rather die." Jang Taejin smiled and said, "Then I will kill you." Dae-sun punched Jang Taejin in the face and shouted, "Is this guy crazy?" Jang Taejin immediately pinned Dae-sun's neck to his body and cursed him. "That hurts, you bastard, you're crazy." Dae-sun shouted, Stop, Dad gives up." Dae-sun hugged her neck and tearfully asked, "Why are you so strong? Did you go to the gym during the summer break?" Jang Taejin proudly said, "Having entered high school, of course I have to exercise." Dae-sun pouted and mocked, disgusted with entering a sports school. Jang Taejin scolded, "Your father is crazy." Suddenly someone's voice rang out, "You guys are so noisy." Everyone looked at the door in panic. A pair of hands are opening the door. Hong Sung-hyun scratched his head and explained, "This is not a kindergarten, can you kids shut up?" Do Young panicked and called his name. Hong Sung-hyun, Ha and Cheol timidly replied, "Okay." Looking at everything that was going on, Jang Taejin thought to himself, in any environment there will be trash. Despicable people who only know how to bully the weak. Hong Sung-hyun disdainfully walked in and told Jang Taejin, "Damn reason, long time no see. You've grown taller." Jang Taejin silently thought to himself. He couldn't stand his laugh, thanks to this sinister guy he even got depressed. Hong Sung-hyun, he is a member of a third-rate gang called Scorpion at school. He is the big brother of the class. Seeing that Jang Taejin did not respond to him, Hong Sung-hyun gritted his teeth angrily and said, "You son of a bitch, I'm asking you. Haven't opened your mouth to answer yet." Jang Taejin smiled and said, "Why are you jealous?" Hong Sung-hyun said out loud in surprise, "What, jealousy?" Everyone in the class opened their eyes wide and their mouths opened in surprise when they heard Jang Taejin fearlessly answer like that. Hong Sung-hyun laughed loudly, "Ha ha ha. No wonder you get beaten up every day, you've been out of school for so long that you're itching to be beaten, right?" Jang Taejin looked down, raised his hands and said, "How dare I be rude to a dog?" No, then he looked up and smiled and said, "A guy is not even as good as a dog." Jang Taejin put his hands on his head and bowed down to show that he was obedient and scared of Hong Sung-hyun, but who would have thought that he would dare to retort to the guy who was loved and feared by the whole school, "How dare I be rude to someone?" Jang Taejin's voice came out strongly without any fear, his eyes glared at Hong Sung-hyun as if challenging him to see what he dared to do to him, then continued to speak in a harsh voice, "No, it must be a guy, not as good as a dog, right?" After hearing that, Hong Sung-hyun couldn't believe his ears, his face was frozen. He stammered in bewilderment and asked, What, maybe he still didn't believe what he heard because he's the big brother of a large school and now being insulted by the person he called a brat and calling him a dog, perhaps this is the first time someone has dared to say that to him. Jang Taejin's face looked so cool right now. When his friends heard the words coming out of his mouth in his lethargic state, they all stuck out their tongues in fear. They didn't expect that someone like him would now dare to standing in front of an influential person to curse. But Jang Taejin didn't care at all. Without giving Hong Sung-hyun a chance to say anything, he continued to curse, "You're even worse than an animal." After hearing that sentence, everyone broke out in sweat and everyone opened their mouths in surprise. Do Young thought Jang Taejin had taken some medicine by mistake today and quickly asked, "Hey, Taejin, did you just play with toys or did you hit your head, or not?" As for Jang Taejin, he ignored everyone's words. His eyes were full of hatred because he had been humiliated for so long and now it was time to change. He thought in his mind, it's time to take revenge, pay back the battles, beaten to a pulp in his pathetic past. Hong Sung-hyun at this moment all the blood in his body had been pushed to his brain, his hands were clenched as if preparing to throw his fist in the opposite direction. He lowered his voice and slowly said to Jang Taejin, "Try barking back at me, see?" Hong Sung-hyun moved closer to Jang Taejin, his eyes rolled back, his face showing an extremely dangerous and threatening attitude. "Looks like this guy has eaten lobster liver, try fixing it again." Looking at that big brother's attitude made Jang Tae-jin even more interested. This guy is so cute. Hong Sung-hyun was so bitter and crazy when he saw that the rotten little brat that he had ordered was now laughing at him. You dare laugh at me? Jang Tae-jin also thought without changing his expression. For him, dance, force is strength. Hong Sung-hyun's screams became increasingly louder and harsher, echoing everywhere, causing everyone to pay attention. So as soon as he heard a loud argument coming from a classroom, the teacher quickly arrived. As soon as he walked to the classroom door, he saw two students looking at each other provocatively. Everyone in a good posture was being fought. The teacher immediately shouted, "Hey, hey! What are you two doing?" Seeing that the class was so quiet, I thought the students were concentrating on studying, but instead they were there glaring at each other, yelling at the teacher and threatening them with a ruler pointing straight at the two thuggish students. Suddenly Jang Tae-jin's attitude changed 180 degrees back to his previous innocence and happily turned to explain to the teacher, "Teacher, long time no see, we were just having fun." As for Hong Sung-hyun, he was surprised by Jang Tae-jin's attitude. He really has no shame, and dares to do these tricks in front of me. The teacher also believed that this joke was true because in the past, Jang Tae-jin or any other student had no intention of daring to argue in front of Hong Sung-hyun. So he quickly told the class to calm down and take their seats, started studying, but it seemed like Jang Tae-jin had something to say so he hesitated. "Teacher." When his classmates saw the teacher solving the problem, Jang Tae-jin also returned to his normal attitude as before and felt relieved. Fortunately he saw it, otherwise he would have eaten everyone's bran. I hope he did. Say nothing more. Knowing Jang Tae-jin has changed before and he's back and more powerful than before, he glanced at Hong Sung-hyun and whispered to him, "Hey, Hong Sung-hyun. Let's meet at lunchtime." He winked at Hong Sung-hyun like he was commanding him then left. When his friends saw him, they wanted to pray to God, but they didn't expect that things would go further than they imagined. Hearing that made them want to pee their pants. Help. After hearing this, Hong Sung-hyun's eyes were wide open and his mouth was wide open, not understanding what was going on, so he gritted his teeth and couldn't do anything but swallow his anger. He thought to himself that this guy really wants to die. "I'm sure, we'll give you satisfaction." After the class was calmed down, the teacher began to repeat what he said. The higher the university entrance exam score, the more all the students in the class agree, the higher the university entrance exam score. The teacher continued, "The more beautiful the wife would be," the whole class said in unison. The more beautiful the wife would be. On this side, the bitterness still hasn't subsided. Hong Sung-hyun looked at Jang Tae-sun with dangerous eyes and chuckled. After class, it was time for break. The guys went to Jang Tae-sun to inform him. "You're screwed, Jang Tae-sun, Sun Ji-hyun is gathering his clique there." Jang Tae-sun, still calmly sleeping on the table, replied, "I know." It was time to go out for the second period, but my friends were still worried and continued to advise Jang Tae-sun, "What did you eat by mistake today? Avoiding poop is not cowardice. It's just fear of being dirty, do you understand?" Jang Tae-sun loudly responded to each sentence. "But I wanted to clean it up better." During third period recess, our friends continued to tell Jang Tae-sun, "Think again, play less." My friend, Jang Tae-sun humorously said, "I play with toys very regularly." After hearing this sentence, my friends literally stood still for 5 seconds without saying anything. Finally, the bell signaling lunchtime rang. Jang Tae-sun looked at his friends who were still trying to surround him and asked if they weren't going to eat. What was the matter? These friends couldn't do anything anymore. Knowing they couldn't stop Jang Tae-sun, so they cried and said, "You bastard, how can we swallow this? Thanks to your grace, we are about to die without a whole body. Here it is." "Did you eat bear bile by mistake? Do you know how terrible Sun Yoon's gang is? I heard they play very dirty. Thanks to your blessing, we are about to go to the altar, huh?" Jang Tae-sun stood up and shouted back. "Talking too much, go eat." My friends cried and said back, "What do you mean by talking too much? How can we eat watching you go to your death?" Jang Tae-sun smirked and thought, "These guys are really brothers, they are different from each other." Everyone was on their way down to the restaurant when they heard a familiar voice, "Hey, where's that guy with the blank face?" After we heard it, we turned pale and looked over. That was Hong Sun-ji-hyun, so he was waiting for Jang Tae-sun to come down to start the fight. Hong Sun-ji-hyun's friend looked like a hooligan and asked fiercely, "We all gathered together and were planning something. It was just the first day of school and we were already being beaten like that, huh?" My friends were so scared that they almost fainted when Jang Tae-sun came from behind and shouted loudly, "Please stop crowing." Everyone who saw it was shocked. "Oh my god, this guy has really lost his mind, oh my god." When Hong Sun-ji-hyun and the others heard it, their ears were deaf. "What did you say? What did you say? Who is this ignorant guy? Do you want to die? You've reached our number, kid." Jang Tae-sun stood majestically looking straight at Hong Sun-ji-hyun and said, "Why don't you shut up and follow me? This is a sacred school place, don't defile it." When my friends heard it, they still didn't believe that Jang Tae-sun's talent could now fight, so they quickly stopped him. "Jang Tae-sun, you're crazy," and Hong Sun-ji-hyun's group also said loudly, "Where are you? You also have to go sell salt. If you you're not pretty, you won't get any food." Jang Tae-sun was still very calm and said to his friends, "Chill out guys, when we're done I'll treat you to pizza." The guys replied back rudely, "It's crazy, it's so chill. It's my first time fighting, it must be hard." Hong Sun Ji-hun's friends heard it and said, "If at this point you can still think about pizza, take care of your body first, you monkey." Hong Sun Ji-hun told his accomplices to take everyone with them. Jang Tae-sun thought to himself, yes, just call them all out, spring is the ideal time to clean. Scene changed to a garden. Hong Sun Ji-hun's soldiers were all gathered, they stood solemnly and bowed, greeting Big Brother. Jang Tae-sun also had his own plan, so he gave Do-young a laptop and slowly said, "Do-young depends on it." Do-young sadly picked up the phone and said, "Yes, I understand." Jang Tae-sun looked at his friends then looked straight at Hong Sun Ji-hun's face. Hong Sun Ji-hun's group was very crowded at the moment, forming a large field for Jang Tae-sun and his friends to stand in the middle. Looking at this match, it was already dangerous because the forces of both sides were so different that they were not evenly matched. Do-young listened to Jang Tae-sun and picked up the phone in front of him. Preparing to take action. The machine's lights light up and it's ready to do its job. On this side, Hong Sun Ji-hun still calmly spoke to the fraternity, "Sorry guys. It's because of this insolent guy that you can't have lunch." A friend listened and said again, "It's okay, sir." To increase excitement, he told everyone, "Today I invite you guys for a drink, there are also handrails." After listening, they shouted loudly, "Thank you Big Brother. Big Brother is the best." As for Jang Tae-sun, he smiled contemptuously and thought, "You guys know how to enjoy drinking too much." Then he asked, "Hong Sun Ji-hun, I asked you one." Hong Sun Ji-hun heard big wedding, "Ha, ask me, this move can't be done again." Then he changed his expression, his eyes were a little wet. "Why do you keep bullying me and these weak classmates? We're not friends." Anyone who hears this sentence will probably think this is a joke. Crazy question. Hong Sun Ji-hun stood on his hips and boldly answered, "There are many reasons. First, I hate going to the same school as you lowly people. Second, I hate having to smell the smell of that guy who eats kimchi for breakfast, and I also hate piles of bean residue in your brains too. You poor bastards pollute my eyes." Jang Tae-sun heard those words and thought, "This guy has a good answer." Jang Tae-sun continued to act pitiful, "But we are still friends. Beating up friends and stealing money is very bad. Your father is lawyer Hong Jang-hyuk and a prominent member of the city council. If he knew you lived like this, what would your father think? Think about your father and stop." Hong Sun Ji-hun heard and reminded, "When it comes to my father, I say it directly. Why is my old man now bringing up his father's name and status to say it? Hong Sun-hyun is so big, you keep worrying about trivial matters like that. I don't need you to worry. As you said, step on those lowly people until they can't stand being stupid anymore." Jang Tae-sun said that in his mind, he's disdainful, considering his family's education, behold. Jang Tae-sun continued, "It turns out that he relied on his father's position to bully others." Hong Sun-hyun still replied, "Of course the principal's son and the head of the management department were both my old man's acquaintances. As long as he gave away the money, everything could go smoothly." Why did Jang Tae-sun suddenly change so much? Tears fell down and said, "Please forgive my friends, they didn't do anything wrong." Hong Sun-hyun laughed again and continued, "Why not? More than that, you guys are just low-class people and dare to pay me back. I'll take this opportunity to teach you a lesson until you can't open your mouth anymore." Jang Tae-sun heard it and leaned down and said, "I beg them to apologize to you. Please forgive us." Hong Sun-hyun was surprised again. "Sorry, you've been playing the game for more than 180 minutes, right? Do you think you who is?" Jang Tae-sun shouted, "Then I'll pay you." Hong Sun-hyun felt happy when he heard about money. "Money, okay, if you pay me 100,000 won then I will forgive you." Immediately Jang Tae-sun pulled out a wad of money and gave it to Hong Sun-hyun, saying, "This is the money for my parents' sweat and tears and my spending money for a month. I'm sorry again, please forgive my friend." Hong Sun-hyun, when he saw Jang Tae-sun giving him such a large amount of money, he was startled and said, "Wow, this dumb guy is quite rich. Or did he just win the lottery?" Jang Tae-sun still looked scared. "Please forgive them." As for Hong Sun-hyun, seeing that they had given in to him, he happily smiled. But he stepped forward and gave Jang Tae-sun a slap, causing blood to spurt out of his mouth. Jang Tae-sun thought in his head, "This is really a dog, I already expected it but it still hurts so much, but I still have to try to finish the drama first." When his friends saw Tae-sun in pain, they cried in pain, they could only stand and watch without doing anything to help. Jang Tae-sun still didn't react, he sat on the ground and wiped his wound with his sleeve. Thoughtfully looked at Hong Sun-hyun. Do Jae-young saw his best friend in pain and immediately froze. Then he pressed swallow to end the recorded video, completing the task assigned by Jang Tae-sun. Jang Tae-sun wiped his wound and whispered, "Now it's time to clean up the trash." Hong Sun-hyun finished processing and turned away. But before he could take a few steps, his name was called. "Hey, Hong Sun. Where are you going? What's the fun in going now?" After listening to Hoi Hong Sun-hyun, he was surprised and didn't know what happened. Hong Sun-hyun finished processing and turned away, but before he could take a few steps, his name was called. "Hey, Hong Sun. Where are you going? What's the fun in going now?" After listening to Hoi Hong Sun-hyun, he was surprised and didn't know what happened. Jang Tae-sun twisted his neck to relax, then raised his face and said, "I'm not done with you yet." Hong Sun-hyun was so angry when he heard that, he didn't expect that just now he was obediently obedient, but now he's turning around as fast as rice paper. This ignorant guy, tell me again. Give me the car. Jang Tae-sun looked cool and cursed back, "You trash, if your ancestors knew you lived like this, they would sweat." Hong Sun-hyun heard this and looked at him with wide eyes and shouted back, "You son of a bitch, Jang Tae-sun, how much do you know?" Jang Tae-sun's eyes were still glaring, but they must have created a lot of bad karma to have a nephew like this. When Hong Sun-hyun's brothers heard that, their ears were itchy and they shouted, "This guy, are you tired of living?" Luckily, he left, big brother. Hong Sun-hyun's cold face grated his teeth and looked at Jang Tae-sun, this stone guy. Ordered all the brothers to rush up and quickly sew his mouth shut. When they heard the order, some picked up sticks. Others grabbed tips and rushed straight towards Jang Tae-sun. They ran until they rushed forward like horse hooves. You should death. But before they could even make a move, the superiors were beaten by Jang Tae-sun until they were so bloody they couldn't see a way to retreat. When Hong Sun-hyun and the others saw it, they stared with wide eyes. What the hell? He couldn't believe that a little kid who was bullied by him every day could now be so cruel. Hong Sun-hyun's accomplices were repeatedly beaten and seriously injured. Some were bleeding from their mouths, others had their foreheads chipped. They saw that they were gradually losing among dozens of people and one of the people using weapons, and the player was constantly shocked and scared. Jang Tae-sun clenched his fists and looked at them with a disdainful smirk. Sorry, I don't know how to measure my strength. On this side. Jang Tae-sun's friends stood in a corner and saw his strength. They were so amazed that they couldn't close their mouths, not believing everything in front of them, not believing that the other person was their friend. Hong Sun-hyun quickly ordered the thugs around. What the hell are you doing? Attack him quickly, they replied in fear with a trembling voice. Yes, I understand. But in my head, I think I'm just defending myself, but I'm not stupid. Hong Sun-hyun shouted an order, quickly tear it apart, beat it to death. Seeing that, Jang Tae-sun still leisurely stood waiting for those monkeys to rush in. To see how big they were. Quickly after that, a punch was raised straight to Jang Tae-sun's face. But before he could even touch his face, he was punched by Jang Tae-sun and fell to the ground. With blood flowing from his mouth and nose, the other guys continued to rush up with sticks to deal with him. But it seems that after the last summer vacation, Jang Tae-sun had trained his muscles very well, so in less than a minute, some of those brats were lying at Jang Tae-sun's feet. There are still a few stubborn guys who want to compete with Jang Tae-sun. They stubbornly rush forward, and Jang Tae-sun also wants to play the time game of taking a few steps back to let them smell life a little more and then attack later, not late. A few minutes later, Jang Tae-sun stretched out his long legs and kicked a basic right at them. Then that guy's eyes were looking straight, but they were 180 degrees off. One looked to the left, the other looked to the right, blood spurted out from his mouth and nose. Hong Sun-hyun and a few of his close friends stood from afar, seeing the fear of Jang Tae-sun approaching them, and immediately ordered, "Don't back down, keep walking." There were a few more guys who still tried to obey and rushed to fight Jang Sun-hyun, but they probably already knew the outcome. As expected, a Jang Tae-sun weighed all of them in a few minutes and saw that each one was neither a ghost nor a demon anymore. When Hong Sun-hyun and the others saw it, their eyes turned blue and they probably didn't even dare to move their feet. Jang Tae-sun dealt with these guys in just a few notes. Looking at him fighting, he seemed so brave that he had fought all this time without any injuries. Seeing these scenes, he was afraid that he would lose to Jang Tae-sun, so Hong Sun-hyun quickly called the two close juniors next to him to deal with him. He shouted that it's impossible, let's go up too. They also obeyed and rushed up to fight with Jang Tae-sun, seeing the old commander's names with black eyebrows and black eyes. They also sneaked away. They couldn't disobey orders, so they had to courageously rush forward. They held logs in both hands and rushed toward Jang Tae-sun, intending to hit him from the side. But Jang Tae-sun discovered them and attacked in time. When Hong Sun-hyun saw the scene before his eyes, he couldn't believe his eyes. Was it really him? Was it really Jang Tae-sun? On this side, Jang Tae-sun kicked his foot and all the wood fell into pieces. Those thugs, completely defenseless, crazily picked up a piece of wood and intended to attack Jang Tae-sun. Jang Tae-sun saw the funny scene ahead and quickly said, "Come on, don't play with toys, it's very dangerous." Everyone saw the good-for-nothing guy being defeated along with Hong Sun-hyun's sky-high style, and their faces were frozen. As for Jang Tae-sun, after a battle with dozens of guys, he seemed a bit tired. But he hadn't finished solving the problem yet, so he was still exhausted. He shouted loudly at Hong Sun-hyun, "What are you guys looking at? Why don't you kneel down quickly?" When the group of friends saw Jang Tae-sun being so brave, They were extremely admiring and stood outside shouting his old spirit's name for him. Jang Tae-sun majestically said to Hong Sung-hyun, "You too, Hong Sung-hyun, don't you even kneel down." When Hong Sung-hyun heard his name mentioned, he trembled and sweated profusely. But his mouth still refused to give up and brazenly cursed back at Jang Tae-sun. "You son of a bitch, do you think I will leave you alone?" Hong Sung-hyun comforted himself and reassured himself, he was just Jang Tae-sun, a trash guy. Jang Tae-sun gradually moved closer to Hong Sung-hyun. When he saw that, he trembled in fear and stammered without saying a word. "Whatever you want, don't come closer." Before he could finish speaking, Hong Sung-hyun received a fatal slap from him. The slap was so loud that the whole other world must have heard. He is a big brother of a territory who used to bully many people and not let anyone touch a hair, but now he gets his first slap in life like this. He looks really bitter, he thought to himself, why is it suddenly so scary? But on the outside, he still looks very strong. Still loudly threatening Jang Tae-sun, "Don't let me repeat it a second time, you will bear the consequences," and Jang Tae-sun said, "You should re-examine what you did to him, someone else goes." Hong Sung-hyun was in pain and couldn't control the tears falling down and said to Jang Tae-sun, "You thought my dad would leave me alone, I won't forgive you," but in my head I was thinking fearfully, "Oh, this guy won't know how to be afraid." Jang Tae-sun used his hands to tease Hong Sung-hyun, "Everything you spit out is rotten, you son of a bitch, your father despises you." Hong Sung-hyun screamed, "Mother, do you think I'm afraid of you? I will kill you." Hong Sung-hyun's eyes lit up and looked towards Jang Tae-sun. He clenched his fists and rushed forward to punch Jang Tae-sun, but he stopped him. The two hands were pressed tightly together. Neither one willing to give up, they kept punching each other like that for dozens of minutes until blood started to drip down. Hong Sung-hyun looked painful as if he was about to faint. But for the sake of dignity, he had to grit his teeth. Waiting for Hong Sung-hyun to no longer have any strength left, Jang Tae-sun took the opportunity to push him back. The prince's hands that he had been serving all day had now changed into what shape he was in. He was screaming in pain and crying miserably. The pain was so painful that I couldn't bear it anymore and fell to the ground, holding my hands and crying, "Mom, my hand, my hand." But he still swore to let Jang Tae-sun suffer. "That bastard, I will kill you and destroy your whole family." Jang Tae-sun heard it but his ears itched to say it again. "It seems like you haven't been beaten enough, right?" That's a very good line that Jang Tae-sun quoted from the dialogue of the story of War Against Evil, a very famous movie in the future, Hybrid. As for Hong Sung-hyun, he still couldn't believe the truth and couldn't believe that he could lose so miserably. He was in pain and could only lie on the ground screaming at the sky. But Jang Tae-sun still had no intention of forgiving him, so he moved forward and raised his hand, wanting to punch him a few more times. When my friends outside saw it, they were scared and didn't think this could happen. But just a few seconds later blood was sprayed everywhere, the whole area is red. It was Jang Tae-sun who punched Hong Sung-hyun until he was half dead, leaving him lying motionless on the ground, covered in blood from head to toe. Seeing this, Jang Tae-sun was still not satisfied. He thought, it would be a shame to stop after this, should I play around with the lawyer a bit? Then he turned to Do-jong and said, "Give me the phone." Do-jong on this side was standing there frozen when he heard the call and quickly followed. He took out his phone, not knowing what fun he was going to make. 113 right, there is a bloody fight going on here, the location is the mountain behind Jang School. There are up to 20 people injured, please bring 119 immediately. It turns out he called the police and paramedics to see what happens next. The scene changed to the hospital. From inside the hospital room a loud scream came out that shook the whole hospital. My arms couldn't move, oh my god, my legs. Hong Sung-hyun and his accomplices were transferred to the hospital with injuries all over their bodies. The doctor came to ask if he had pain in his body and the pain in his head, arms, and chest was all over the place. Because of his serious injuries and family conditions, he was transferred to the Vipiku room. Hong Sung-hyun lay motionless on the bed with his whole body bandaged. The doctor said it would take 16 weeks to recover. The bones and joints in his hand were completely broken. The surgery was successful, but in the future he will be disabled. Seeing his son lying motionless and still breathing oxygen along with what the doctor said made his father no longer shocked. He shouted loudly, "That damn guy, where is he?" His assistant next to him was startled when he heard it and asked what it meant. He said again, "This bastard made my son so impulsive, where is he now? Hurry and put him in jail." Currently Hong Sung-hyun is lying in bed, wearing a neck brace and all kinds of bandages. It is said that the treatment takes up to 16 weeks. Even the arms were no exception. They all had to be in casts because the bones and joints in the right fingers were broken. Hearing this, Hong Sung-hyun's father looked at his son with a gloomy face. The henchman with a tense expression said, even though he had surgery, he would be disabled. The father with a look of hatred asked the henchman, that bastard, where he was. Hong Sung-hyun's father said, quickly put him in jail, because he was beaten so much that Hong Sung-hyun's body was full of injuries, and he still couldn't wake up. His henchman said hesitantly, Park Kyung-mi has already started working, but that student was also injured and is currently being treated in the emergency room. The father said, student, how could someone like that be a student? He shouted loudly, what do you mean, you can't arrest a student? My son has to be disabled for the rest of his life, the henchman replied in a cold sweat. That's not it, sorry Senator. Hong Sung-hyun's father firmly said. Quickly contact the school management, I want to meet them, the henchman replied. Yes sir. The father said indignantly that not only him but his entire family must pay the price. Scene changed to the emergency center. Detective Park Dong-suk is questioning. Name, Jang Tae-seon, Class 4, second year of Jangju High School, is that right? On this side, Jang Tae-seon was also injured but less severely than Hong Sung-hyun. The inspector continued to question, why did you do that? Jang Tae-seon replied, what did you do? Why did he attack those students? The inspector asked with suspicion. Thinking that Jang Tae-seon was the one who beat those students. Jang Tae-seon replied in shock, oh inspector, you're exaggerating, you're the victim. The gangsters over there are guilty. The inspector's words didn't seem to reach his ears. So Jang Tae-seon put on an ugly face and said, they beat me, I'm also a patient. It seems the inspector lost his patience so he shouted angrily, you still dare to deny it, you are the one who assaulted them, right? Am I right, tell me quickly, if I investigate. It will be exposed. Jang Tae-seon became tense and looked at the inspector, saying nothing. Unexpectedly, Jang Tae-seon hid the phone there. The detective did not know that he was being recorded by Jang Tae-seon. This inspector became more and more angry and impatient. He shouted loudly, tell me quickly, brat, why did you attack those students? Did you intentionally call them out, because you didn't know? Do you like the students in that class? Are you acting like a bully? If you don't have money, they have to borrow it from your friends. It can't be said that they have robbed you. Jang Tae-seon said, did the inspector receive the money? After hearing Jang Tae-seon ask that, the inspector was startled and speechless. He cursed silently, this brat. Jang Tae-seon said with steady eyes. Why did the inspector only ask me? Besides, I'm still a minor, neither my legal representative nor guardian is present here. Inspectors don't have the right to interrogate people like criminals, right? The inspector was speechless, only able to babble two words, so what? This time the inspector started to move. He grabbed Jang Tae-seon's shirt and said, this kid is not blowing his nose properly, are you talking about something? Jang Tae-seon was startled and shouted, ah. Not only did he grab Jang Tae-seon by the collar, he also shook Jang Tae-seon hard and shouted loudly, naughty people like you, I haven't only seen it once or twice. Jang Tae-seon shouted loudly, ah. The inspector shouted, he was so insolent. Jang Tae-seon couldn't stand it anymore and told the inspector to stop. At this moment, Jang Tae-seon's tears were streaming down both sides. He shouted loudly, uncle, I'm so dizzy, why did you do that? Please call another inspector. Even though he said that, the inspector still wouldn't let him go, so he had to call doctor. The doctor and nurse heard the call and immediately ran to ask, what's going on? Jang Tae-seon said with a sad face, the detective wants to kill me. He said out of breath, he treated me like a prisoner. The doctor became angry and started shouting at the inspector. What are you planning to do to this student? Are you crazy? The doctor kept asking, if something happened to the patient, would he be responsible? The doctor raised his hand and pointed straight at the inspector's face and said, he is the patient, can't you be gentle with the questioning? The inspector, when questioned like that, broke out in a cold sweat and couldn't say anything. The inspector shoddily replied, that's not the case. Suddenly the nurse's expression changed and she stammered, doctor, patient, him. Looks like he's unconscious, the doctor replied, what? The doctor shouted loudly to call the nurse in, nurse, where is the nurse? Prepare to lower blood pressure and move the patient immediately, at this time. The inspector's face had changed color, he was afraid that if something happened to Jung Tyson, he is the person responsible. The doctor said, quickly take an X-ray and MRI. This is an emergency, it could be an early concussion, check his head carefully. The nurses became nervous and replied, yes. The doctor still kept questioning the inspector. Did you come here to assault the patient? The doctor's voice was so loud that the whole emergency center could hear it. Scene changes to an afternoon at Jeonjo High. There is an important meeting here, the director spoke. As everyone knows, yesterday at our school there was a bullying incident. Recently, school violence is at an alarming level. The school needs to quickly take measures. An angry-looking teacher spoke up. He had to expel that bad boy. He humiliated more than 30 students that day. Teacher Kim looked puzzled and rejected the other teacher's opinion. What are you saying? That match was 30 against 1. If you punish that student, then the remaining students will also have to receive the punishment. The other 3 teachers also spoke up. What, Teacher Kim, are you defending your students? Teacher Kim became tense and quickly explained, I mean it wouldn't be fair to only punish her. The director asked. What does Teacher Kim mean that he wants all the students involved in this incident to be expelled? Kim stammered and replied, no, what I mean is, we should come up with a more balanced solution. The director continued, the media has reported on this incident, everyone is still watching us, this could be a big stain on the school. Speaking of this, he smiled strangely and said, but if students who commit crimes are severely punished, the school's image will improve. Continue transitioning to the hospital. There is a hand typing continuously. On the screen are stock figures. Turns out it was Jang Taizan, eating cake and thinking. I was diagnosed with a concussion, have to recuperate for 8 weeks, so I don't have to go to school, I can comfortably buy stocks. He enjoyed it and thought to himself, this is great. He thought, the special care room is so quiet, what's the use of having so much money, of course it's for enjoyment. A little pretending can fool them all, hee hee. Thanks to that, I can learn all the subjects I need to learn through textbooks and online lessons. He smirked as if he was having fun. Looking at the data table, money begets money. He was happy to enjoy the results. Today's profit had reached 700 million, the trend was still increasing. What a great time to work. Suddenly a voice rang out, attracting Jang Taizan's attention, how does Taizan feel? It turned out it was the lore uncle. Jang Taizan saw him and immediately said, oh, just call me by my name, I'm just a high school student, no need to be polite, he replied. But that's the operating policy of the school, company of law. Uncle continued, then call it Taizan sentence. Jang Taizan hired a lawyer named Jo Yundi. Sammo is a law firm in the top 3 in Korea, there is nothing that money cannot solve. Jang Taizan smiled and said, ha ha ha, you're so stiff. He smiled wryly and said, that's why I was kicked out of the organization. Thinking back, in the past, lawyer Joe held the position of Deputy Prosecutor General of the Public Prosecutor's Office. After retiring, he worked as a lawyer, is a first-class state civil servant. Jang Taizan suddenly said seriously, but he still didn't cut it off completely. The lawyer's face also changed because it seemed like he was being told the black eye. He said, haha, you also know about that organization. Jang Taizan replied, I don't know much, but if you make a wrong move, that step will be a knife cutting into your neck. The lawyer looked at Jang Taizan with scared eyes. Without saying a word, Jang Taizan glanced at the lawyer and thought to himself, I not only know, but also know very well, about the organization that represents the face of the prosecutor in the future that you do not know about. Suddenly there was a loud sound of people talking outside. Attracting the attention of Jang Taizan and the lawyer, I didn't care, the doctor told him to rest. That noise continues, why is the prosecutor from the department coming here? If you stop me from investigating, you'll be charged with resisting public duty. Do you understand? It seems like the inspector continued to find Jang Taizan. The lawyer turned to look at Jang Taizan. He also glanced at the lawyer and nodded meaningfully. The inspector knocked on the door and rushed in, there was another person behind him. He shouted loudly, you little brat, you're done for today. It turned out that the person standing behind the inspector was a prosecutor. The inspector shouted that Prosecutor Kong Kyung-jun of the Crime Prevention Department is coming to arrest you. Jang Taizan just looked at the two of them and said nothing. The prosecutor saw that and immediately said, I heard he was shaken. But he still seemed very conscious. Suddenly, a scream came from the hospital room. Stop pretending, stand up quickly, brat, causing many people on the street to panic. When Jang Taizan cursed, he pretended not to hear, covered his ears and silently complained. He really has a loud mouth. That person questioned him, the prosecutor is already here. Are you still pretending to be the victim? Looking at him criticizing him, he secretly thought that, from beginning to end, he was continuously accusing him. There was also a prosecutor. He was surprised to see a prosecutor coming, but at this moment he still couldn't hear a word. He silently assessed the prosecutor that he looked like a parasite. This is called interrogation. He clearly took money from old Jang Hyuk. Taizan sat on the hospital bed and calmly asked, do you have an arrest warrant? He screamed and cursed, what, an arrest warrant? What are you talking about, you brat? Taizan happily thought to himself, what a twist, he would definitely die today. You looked at him calmly and said, can I see your inspection card? Hearing the words that had just been uttered, the prosecutor next to him was complacent and laughed loudly, ho ho, look what this kid is saying, let him see, Inspector Kim. Inspector Kim agreed and answered, clear. The angry inspector darkened his face and said, this kid hasn't blown his nose cleanly. After saying that, he quickly held out his industry card and shouted loudly, look closely. Kid, I'm Kim Dong-zeek, prosecutor of the prosecutor's office. He sighed, took a quick glance and secretly assessed him, he is a typical state civil servant, isn't he? Not satisfied. He coldly asked. The card was seen. What about the arrest warrant? He was a bit panicked. Seeing that Tyson couldn't do anything, he still said loudly, this kid is stubborn. Do you know what an arrest warrant is? Haha. He seemed to hold his hand, thinking to himself. Of course I knew, I was fully prepared, why didn't I know? As he had prepared in advance. He explained a series of basic laws to him. The Republic of Korea's constitution recognizes basic human rights. Hearing that, the others felt guilty and sweated. Tyson continued, if a state agency wants to arrest, detain, confiscate, or search a person's body or property, an arrest warrant issued by a court is required. Some people panicked and said, what? He looked at the others and said loudly, that is stipulated in Articles 12 and 16 of the Constitution, right? Let me read Articles 12 and 16. Arrest warrants are divided into two types. One is a letter of issuance. Warrants are issued if requested by the prosecutor. Secondly, letters of orders are issued by the court without the request of the prosecution. According to criminal proceedings, arrest warrants, search warrants and parole orders issued when requested by the prosecutor are granted. When those people heard the law being preached, they immediately gritted their teeth and cursed, this brat, how dare he? Tyson calmly added, according to the same procedure, the juvenile court will issue a detention order, search warrant, authentication order and other equivalent orders. He humbly said, that's what I know. Having finished speaking, the anger in his heart could not be contained and burst out, shouting loudly, do I have to say anything more? The other people heard the curse and started to feel nervous. You are able to scream loudly, I'm the victim, why are you only targeting me? This hospital room is also considered my residential space, right? You shouted so loudly that even the people outside the room were afraid, scared. The sound echoed everywhere around, making the listener uncomfortable. The inspector angrily questioned, you're still in school, don't worry about remembering math formulas or English vocabulary or something, learn the rules. To do what? Tyson looked at Prosecutor Kong angrily and said, Prosecutor Kong Kyung-jun, you are a smart person, you must know that right, they are pretending to be interrogators to threaten me. During that time, he seemed to have found some fun and thought to himself, oh, maybe I should add a little more salt and fish sauce, it would be much more interesting. Thinking about it, he shouted, even though I am a high school student, you can come here without a lawyer, prosecutors are supposed to protect the weak, this conversation is like being broadcast on a loudspeaker, broadcast like that, each word echoed everywhere around the hospital. Prosecutor Khan laughed loudly when he heard Tyson's clarification, ha ha ha, what a weak person. Is it you? What nonsense, how dare you say that in front of me? Tyson didn't listen and secretly judged him, he looked like a crazy guy. He laughed mockingly, pointed his finger at him and said, dare to spit out that stupid and empty set of rules, haha. He looked like he was crazy and said contemptuously, you poor people, don't have much hope, haha. Tyson calmly asked, so are you planning to force me? Prosecutor Kong turned to give orders, Inspector Kim, quickly go get the emergency arrest warrant, don't let this kid here talk nonsense anymore, I will call the court. The warrant will be there soon. Yes, he agreed to go to work immediately. Tae-san was a bit surprised. Haha, he's already finished talking to the court. Then he said some sarcastic words to you, you're screwed, son, you dare brag in front of the prosecutor, you son of a bitch. Tyson thought to himself, he didn't expect them to make all the strong moves in one go. He sighed and expressed disappointment and said, even though I knew you guys were rotten, I didn't expect it to reach this level. When the other two heard that, they felt guilty and then angrily said, what did you say? He added, from the inspector, the prosecutor, and now even the judge. The prosecutor was so angry that he was sweating profusely, shaking his legs as he adjusted his glasses and said softly, this bastard. He started pretending to whine, oh, is this my country? Having been suppressed all this time, Prosecutor Kang's anger broke out, revealing its true nature, raising his hand to punch Tyson in the face and cursing, this son of a bitch. But before he could do anything, someone suddenly said loudly, stop quickly. Everyone turned towards the door in surprise. That person jumped up as if to grab the prosecutor's neck, making everyone unable to react. He was startled and shouted loudly, do something. Tyson witnessed this battle scene and secretly exclaimed, he was so brave. Seeing him approaching him, the inspector quickly shouted and moved away. Didn't he see that we were on duty? The four-eyed guy was brave for a few seconds, then got scared and shouted, please leave, or I will call the police. When the other guys heard that, they started to threaten him and call the police. Hey, doctor, you're just normal, if you know your fate. Get out of here. He continued, this kid has been convicted and is at risk of escape. We have requested an arrest warrant. People outside don't understand what's going on when they see this. The four-eyed doctor said loudly, you can, if anything happens. We doctors are responsible, so please go out. Tyson next to me heard these words and chuckled, he touched me so much. He silently praised the doctor, this is a true doctor. Tyson looked at something glowing and thought, only I know that the entire conversation was recorded. He pondered and wondered if he should act again. His head was spinning, maybe he should practice a little Tai Chi. His expression gradually became strange, his four-eyed brother shouted worriedly. What's wrong with you? Tyson cried out and then performed a convulsion, under the screams of his four-eyed brother. Wake up, nurse, prepare to get electric shock. Everyone around was panicking. He was proud and performed his act, reached the top. Hearing the screams, the other three men's eyes widened in panic and fear. Prosecutor Kong was falling into deep thought when suddenly someone called out, Kong Kyung-jun. He was even more alarmed when he saw a person wearing a neat suit walking towards him. Kong Kyung-jun stood still for a few seconds, thinking to himself, oh my god, is that Vice President Joe? He was scared and wondered why he was here. Not too fast, not too slow. With a bang, the deputy director decisively slapped him in the face, causing him to stagger and become unsteady on his feet. Suddenly beaten, he did not have time to react and fell down. The deputy general shouted loudly and questioned, are you thugs? Inspector Kim quickly explained that, Deputy Chief, this is not what you think. But his fate was not much different from the prosecutor's. He was punched in the face by the deputy general. He fell down on the prosecutor in pain and cried out. Witnessing this scene, the four-eyed doctor and the other person trembled and gasped in surprise. After the deputy general finished typing, he took out his phone and dialed someone's number. After the other end picked up the phone, he immediately said hello. Oh my god, hello boss. How have you been? Since you retired you haven't called me anymore. The deputy general shouted loudly and criticized the person on the other end of the line, saying, Go Young-chan, you bastard, I warned you to be careful with your subordinates. Right, on the floor, the other two people stood up and asked in surprise. That's what the boss is saying. The deputy director cursed continuously like a machine into the phone. You ordered this bastard Kong Kyung-jun to go to the hospital, right, scum? A department head like you send him because of a few student fights. Even the prosecutor came. Do you believe I strangled you to death? Inspector Kim and Prosecutor Kong heard their boss curse and covered their faces, trembling with fear. Scene changes to Tyson school. At a meeting, someone insisted that he should be expelled from school. The old man smiled evilly and continued, keeping a thug like that would harm the school's image. An old teacher among the people was worried and said, but Mr. Director, there are still no results of the investigation. What if that student is innocent and is expelled from school? The governor blatantly affirmed that my wishes were the same as my father's wishes. I could make decisions as the owner of the school. He didn't seem to know what happened, so he confidently said, as far as I know, the prosecutor is in the process of arresting him. He's probably in jail now, huh? The old teacher was so shocked when he heard that he opened his mouth and asked, what? At this time, the vice principal also spoke up. You can, Director Kong. He said the disciplinary action will be postponed until the truth is verified and the court issues a verdict against student Jang Tyson. When the director heard that, he angrily asked the vice principal. What do you mean? What if this kid affects the school's reputation? The principal here also agreed with the vice principal and said, let's wait for the results of the investigation together, Director Yang. If it is resolved hastily, according to the vice principal, not only will the school's reputation be damaged, if affected, our school will also be watched by the Department of Education. The old director was not satisfied at all and shouted loudly, why is this principal so indecisive? We must make a decision immediately. Not letting anyone have an opinion contrary to his, he quickly said loudly, I would like to announce that from today Jang Tyson will be expelled from school. He continued to affirm that he was not allowed to transfer schools. This was not a request, but the wish of my father, the president of this school. Do you understand? Hearing that, everyone present at the meeting bowed their heads, dare to argue. Suddenly, someone opened the door and walked in. Knowing that he was interrupting the meeting, he said, Sorry, Director, I have something to report. The old director shouted loudly, what's going on? He was trembling and couldn't speak. The thing is. Then, he whispered into the director's ear. He panicked and said, what? The online community is in an uproar. But what is it? Is there someone fighting online? He was worried and stammered.